Okay, so this second part is all based on common factoring. That's what we're going to mostly be focusing on this small video clip. The key part to common factoring is that you might have a binomial, you might have a trinomial. You're basically trying to divide out whatever you possibly can. So as opposed to expanding binomials where you're multiplying, this is all based on division. For the rules are pretty simple, or at least one of them is. I would say the other one not so much. So the rules. You're going to divide out the largest possible number. Okay. It's usually called a greatest common factor, or GCF, so that's exactly what that means. And then you're also going to divide out any like terms with the smallest exponent. And I'll rephrase that to common letters. Okay, that might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but we're about to clean it up. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples. Again, 3 different types that you can investigate. So the first one is if you had just a binomial. Let's say it's like this, 2x plus 4y. Okay, you can break this up into steps. So if you wanted to, you could do the largest number in blue. Okay, maybe a different color. Whoops. And maybe you do the letters, I don't know, in purple. Okay, so that's one strategy. You could like completely divvy up the question if you like. There's lots of different ways that you could do this. But you pick whatever way that you like there. It's all good. So my first step is I'm going to divide out by the biggest possible number. I'm looking, and my numbers are 2 and 4. I unfortunately cannot divide out by 4 on both sides because if I take 2 divided by 4, I'm going to get a decimal. So another key part that I failed to mention right at the start, it has to be whole numbers. So there can be no decimal or fraction involved, okay, which I'm sure everyone will be pretty pleased with. So in terms of both sides, they are both divisible by 2. Okay, so that takes care of my number part. I look and I don't have any common letters. Okay, so notice that we have x and y. I can't divide by x. It doesn't exist in both terms. I can't divide by y. It does not exist in both terms. So I am actually done. That's it. Some of them are as simple as this. You're just pulling out a number. Okay, like you've probably done the last few years in school. Here's what I'm going to suggest because the notation can be tricky. I personally show the division to start. And then what I do is I carry down whatever I divided by. So notice how that I divided by 2 on both sides. And then I carry down the 2. Okay. So you're going to take everything and essentially divide it. So you have 2x divided by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I'll keep it here just as we're kind of learning a little bit more. X divided by nothing is just still x. Okay. Next part, that plus or minus, whatever's separating it, just keep it. And then we'll just deal with the terms without the sign. Okay, so we're just looking at 4y divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And same thing, y divided by nothing is just still y. Okay, notice our final answer, which is this. We common factored by a factor of 2. If we took 2 and we redistributed into both terms within the bracket, 2 times positive 1x is 2x. 2 times positive 2y is positive 4y. Our GCF was positive 2. Okay, that case is pretty nice because it's really just a number you're pulling out. There's really no issues with letters. So let's try a slightly different one. What if we change this question slightly? So what if we have 2x plus 4x squared? Here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So, same thing, very similar coefficients, right? You have 2 and 4. We already know the largest possible number is going to be 2. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the purple for the common letters. Common letters means there's X's in both, there's Y's in both, there's Z's in both, A's in both, right? Whatever your letter is. In the first example, if we compare the two side by side, notice that your letters are different. You have X and Y. In this one, you have X's. So you have X and X squared. What's technically above that X by itself? It's technically X to the power of 1. So following our rules, we're going to divide out common letters with the smallest or lowest exponent. What's a smaller number, 1 or 2? Well, you're going to want to divide out by just X to the power 1. Okay, so again, the extra step, it really just comes from your division of your letter. Remember, X squared is technically X times X. You could cancel out an X on top and on the bottom, and you'd still be left with something. So I'm going to write it very similar to the left-hand side. We common factored out 2. We also common factored out an X to the power of 1. You do not need to keep the power of 1. I am just to help anyone who's struggling, especially in our online environment. So let's go ahead and divide this out. You have 2 divided by 2. On the left-hand side, looking at the first term. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Anything divided by itself is just the number 1. You also have X divided by X. Okay? Same thing. Anything divided by itself is just 1. So, all I'm left with for the first term is 1. I keep the addition sign, and then I simply move on to the second term, which I just boxed. I'm going to take 4 divided by 2. And same thing, very similar to the left-hand side question. It's just positive 2. I also have X squared divided by X. X squared is the same as X times X. If I divide it by X, I can cancel things out on top and bottom. Okay? So X divided by X would equal 1, and you're still left with a singular X. If that's hard, especially with the exponent laws, think backwards. So X to the power of 1 times what equals X squared. Okay, that might help you just a little bit more. Same thing, if we expand this all out, 2X to the power of 1 times 1 is just 2X. Check, that equals that. 2x to the power of 1 times 2x. 2 times 2 is 4. X times x is x squared. Okay, so we would actually get our original function of 2x plus 4x squared. The last case that you could come into contact with is a trinomial. Again, we try to keep things pretty straightforward for just the online environment, right? So you might have something that looks like this. Okay, a function, a quadratic, which is the unit we're in. So let's tackle this one, and that's probably as far as you're going to go with our course. So first things first, I'm going to use my blue for number. I'm going to look at all of the coefficients. So I have 5, 15, 25. Okay, 5, 15, 25, they all end in 5s. Therefore, they're all divisible by 5. So my first step, they're divisible by 5. Can we divide by a letter? Take a second to think about it. Okay. If you said no, you're correct. We can't divide by a letter because 5x squared has a letter, x. 15x has a letter, that's great. But unfortunately, 25 does not have an x. So all we can do is common factor out the 5, we're going to think about this as division. So we're taking 5x squared plus 15x plus 25, dividing all three terms by 5. 5x squared divided by 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1, and that x squared was not divided by anything, so we leave it alone. We also have 15 divided by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Same thing, we're going to leave the x alone. The last step, you have 25 divided by 5. 25 divided by 5 is just 5. Okay? So, what we're left with is a more simplified version of our trinomial since we common factored. Okay, notice that your leading term is x squared within the brackets. This is a very common form that you might work with when you're dealing with quadratics. So, those are realistically the 3 cases that you'll probably come into contact with on our quiz.